I'm not gonna tell you my name or the squad I was with, or I guess I'd have to kill ya. That's a little joke, but seriously, you can't ask me any questions about this. Just listen. As near as I can figure it, everybody's got something they're running from. Maybe that's what put me in the military in the first place. Trying to get away from home, trying to get away from growing up to be like my old man. And in the end, I was more running towards it than I was ever running away, to the point where I don't even know where I stand anymore. My dad died a few years ago. We weren't close. He was a weird guy, didn't have a lot of friends. I remember the few times I met any of the guys he knew, they were always weird, angry, isolated loners like himself. Guys who lived alone and had trouble sleeping at night. God only knows where he met them. Mostly at bars, I guess. Bars are always full of lonely, unhappy men who just want somebody to talk to. Look at me now, I guess I'm one of them. I've arrived. So this was a couple of years back. I was working a security detail at a top secret location. In that, there was nothing too unusual. There's lots of top secret locations all over the world, and they all need security. I've worked security for some strange facilities. They're not all isolated bunkers carved into the middle of some mountain or out in the desert under the sand. Some are in populated areas because there might be a social element to their studies. I've been stationed in the basements of major shopping malls, helping to install infrared cameras in public washrooms. I'm talking about doing things that clearly violated people's personal freedoms. But we did it anyway. We did our jobs. So of course I'm not going to tell you my name. This one though, this was maybe the closest I've ever come to walking off a job. Though the resulting charge for such insubordination would be a military execution. So obviously I had some good motivation for staying on. We were in some old industrial warehouse outside of a big city. Let's just say a major city. The location we were in went down some 6 or 7 levels of sub-basements, depending on who you asked. And there were supposedly some caves down at the very bottom. I never made it that far. That space has been designated Omega Black, which is for US, Canadian, and British military literally the highest level of security afforded to any space on the planet. Basically, you'd be allowed to take a shit on the floor of the Oval Office before you'd be allowed down in those caves. Nobody even really knew exactly what was going on down there, except for the people who had to know, and they assured me they didn't want to. There were lots of rumors about the place, the caves, and the things that were down in the caves. Rumors and stories and tall tales. Nothing official. A lot of people came into that facility, and only a few bodies came back out. I don't know what happened to the rest. Used up as food or fuel, some of us assumed. Like they had some great big boiler in the very bottom basement where dead men and women were used like firewood or lumps of coal. Others suggested that the missing persons were used as bargaining chips, like currency, being traded with the things that lived in the caves down below. We would give them bodies, dead and alive, and they would give us information and safe passage through their territory. All it cost us was other people's lives and our own souls. The place got shut down back in 2014 after the incident. That's what we called it. I guess it was an incident, or a series of incidents. A narrative slowly unfolding, revealing itself to us over time. There was something loose in the facility. That's what we had to conclude. Something that could climb on walls and see in the dark. Something that could chew through human bones like they were warm mashed potatoes and butter. Something that shat a corrosive acid and screamed in electromagnetic frequencies. That sort of thing played havoc with all the security measures, all our digital cameras and motion detectors. So, we had to search the whole underground compound in teams of 3. Night vision goggles at the ready, shotguns and submachine guns primed for action. We lost 3 soldiers to friendly fire in the first week alone. The brass came down on us pretty hard after that, but it was difficult to stay calm under the circumstances, and those giving the orders were far enough removed from the field of action that they really had no idea what we were dealing with. I had a buddy, let's call him Mike. Mike was part of a team that wound up deep down below, all the way at the bottom, and he was the only one who came back up. He sat with me and downed a bottle of whiskey once he'd returned, and he tried to tell me what he'd seen. He said he couldn't tell if the environment down there was natural or not, if the passages were caves or tunnels or man-made hallways or what. He said the spaces seemed twisted down there, like it was hard to tell which way was up, and it hurt your eyes just to look around. He said the place reminded him of being on a mushroom trip, but way more negative and imposing. Mike and his teammates, they weren't supposed to be down there, but whatever they were hunting, what we were all supposed to be hunting, it had wriggled through some vents and pulled up some floorboards and ceiling tiles. And that's how Mike and his partners had wound up down below where they weren't supposed to be. He said eventually one of the hallways or tunnels, it opened up on this big, expansive plain, like a wheat field, but still underground. Mike said it was like the roof of the cave had become a dome that was replicating a facsimile of the sky. His words. Mike said there were stars set into the cold black clay of the earth overhead, and just looking at them made him feel bad, like he was all alone and cold in a bad place. Which I guess was true. He said the air smelled like nothing he'd ever breathed before, and the wheat, or whatever it was they were growing in the field, it had a weird, oily, iridescent quality to it. They weren't plants, the things that were growing up out of the soil. He said they were more fleshy, like tendrils. Like somebody was growing a field of squid, but all upside down, with the heads buried in the dirt. And Mike said they were moving, like a wind was rustling them, though to him the air was completely still, as if maybe all the limbs were twitching together, little spasmodic urgings passing through the masses of them like a wave of biofeedback impulses. Mike made it back, though his buddies didn't. He told me they met something down there. Something old, something from far away, something that had been with humanity since the very beginning, and before the beginning, back when the human race was just a bunch of chemical signals boiling in a primordial stew. Maybe it was an alien, he thought. Or maybe it was something that just wanted to look like an alien. Mike told me that he suspected he'd come into contact with some sort of an apex predator species, a form of life that had come to convert our world into raw genetic material for easier consumption. The thing may or may not have spoken to Mike in some sort of language of dream imagery, like sounds that resembled how sometimes you can see faces in the clouds, that sort of thing. Either way, no matter what happened down there, Mike came back up, and as soon as he got off duty, he got as wasted drunk as he could manage. He barfed his guts out at me, both figuratively and literally, telling his tale as he dribbled vomit down his shirt. and 3 days later he was dead. Put a plastic bag over his head, sealed it with a long strip of duct tape, and that was that. Easy peasy, no fuss, no mess. Meanwhile, we had to keep hunting that thing. Nobody could get a good look at it, so all we really had to go on was a series of increasingly outlandish rumors and some pretty dicey theories. We thought maybe it was something that had been built down below, constructed like Frankenstein's monster. Or maybe it was one of the things from down below, from the bottom level. Maybe it was something that had come here from another place. Something that liked to hunt in the dark. It wanted to invade our dreams. It wanted to harvest our organs. It wanted to steal our identities and escape the compound and go to our homes wearing our skins like a disguise. Everybody thought they knew what the thing was and what it wanted. But the truth was, we were just a bunch of glorified greenhorns and bootlickers, ill-equipped and underarmed for the circumstances we found ourselves in. A few folks wound up losing their minds down below. There was this constant cerebral pressure, like being deep down underwater, but for just your brain. It made it hard to think, and even more difficult to communicate. Squads constantly argued with each other, and it wasn't uncommon for arguments to spill over into fights, and then a couple of those fights mutated into murders. And again, the brass had to send us scathing personnel reports, decrying our actions and recommending that we all get our shit together before they had us all digging pits on a black bag site. That sort of support from those in charge didn't help matters any. A few soldiers ended up going off on their own, and we found them a day later in the main cafeteria with their guts strung up around the room like holiday lights. One of them was still breathing and talking. He said they were right to go first, and the rest of us would soon follow. I can't remember who shot him. Hell, it might even have been me. Time was a weird thing down there. No natural light, no sense of the world around you, and most of the clocks were broken. Days felt like months, and months blinked by in what felt like minutes. I could have been down there for 30 years. I could have been down there for a week. It's lost to me now. That time, it's all lost to me. The thing we'd been hunting eventually wound up getting caught in a wild spray of gunfire and taken down. Turned out it wasn't just some random monster that had been created in the lab or something that had snuck up from the nightmare of the final sub-basement. It was one of the scientists. One of the lab geeks had done it to himself, had turned himself into that thing, and then started hunting down and consuming his own co-workers and protectors. That was finally too much for the higher-ups to swallow, and the whole program was shut down the following month. I've heard a couple of generals went rogue and are still leading some paramilitary operations down there, above the caves but below the surface of the earth. I hate to think about those soldiers, living off rations, crawling around in the dark, hunting for secrets the human mind isn't meant to readily contain. I've seen a few of those people who have come back from those missions. Most of them, there's no military tribunal, it's straight to execution. And even then, it's basically a race to see if the executioners can get the job done before the soldiers in question manage to end things themselves. But even in those circles, suicide is still frowned on and brings along its own superstitions and rituals. Me, I did my time and I asked no questions. That's why I'm here now and not growing mushrooms at the bottom of one of those big concrete pits where they need to keep all the contaminated corpses. You know, if a family ever complains they just cremate a dog and send them the ashes? It's usually a dog. A couple of times it was a goat when we couldn't get our hands on a dog in time. It's like the Wild West with those people. No rules, no accountability. Just an endless nightmare of military expansion and extra-dimensional beings that can live inside of a bad thought, deep inside a person's mind, without the host ever knowing they're even there. Hell, you could have one inside you right now. So could I, and not even know it. We could be dead and not even know it. Sometimes I wonder. Okay, I guess that's my story. You tell anybody I told you any of this, and well, I'd tell you that I'd kill you, but let's be honest, who'd believe a word of this? I don't think of myself as being lonely, but I do feel this compulsion to tell my little tale, to tell the stories I was told, and to put them in the context of the experiences that I had. But I don't know why. Sometimes I think about how when I'm gone, all my memories of everything I ever did will go with me. Sometimes I think I should write some of this stuff down. But who'd read it? You? You barely stayed awake through my telling it, and you got that bottle of beer propping you up. What chance have I got with an editor or whatever? But it's real stuff that happened. I'm a real person, and it happened to me. My friends, they were real. Real lives, real death, real laughter and tears. Not that it matters. Not that any of us matter. They just bagged us up and shipped us off like we were never there in the first place. I get this itch sometimes, like inside my head, like I can feel the absence of a memory I've forgotten. Something I think I maybe chose to forget, or something that was taken from me. And now it's like there's a little scar inside my brain, and when my thoughts get too close to it, everything starts to short out. It's like a cold emptiness that lives inside of me. I have trouble sleeping too.